Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial we are going to making this really easy plaid tumbler. I'm so excited to show y'all how I accomplished this. I have yet to attempt a plaid myself. I always use either a wrap or a water slide. So without further ado, let's get started. I always trim my water slides or full wraps to the exact size that I need. So you will see me here measuring my 24 plump from the steel Magnolia. It is slightly under 8 inches, and the cup itself is 8 inches tall, but why I say slightly under is you're going to want to trim the file a little bit shorter than the length of the cup so you don't have to pull it over the curve on the bottom. This just makes it easier for me. Some just leave the extra on the bottom and pull it all the way over to get a nice clean finish on the bottom, but I have had bad experience with ripping them, and I just don't want to take a chance on having to use another or not having another in stock. So I wanted to show y'all these amazing clear cast decals from Gracefully Created. All of them are so vibrant, and there are coordinating wraps for the cups. So as soon as I got these in the mail, I just ripped through them and picked out decals that were going to match my full wraps so I could just put them together really easy for a ready to ship drop. And I actually used almost all of them in the midst of making this tutorial. So if you want to see some pictures of them, hop on over to the Brittany Barnes Boutique group, and I will be dropping some pictures of them there, and would love to answer any questions that you have on how I apply these. So with the tumbler, I spray painted that a cream color because I felt like that enhanced the colors better on this wrap. Typically I would spray it white, but it is, I believe, White Sand by Rust-Oleum. And the only reason that I'm applying my full wrap before I epoxy is because we are going to be putting glitter on top of this. That really covers up any blemishes that you may see underneath your, full wrap or water slide, whatever it may be. So if you do not plan on putting some sort of sparkle coat on top of your wrap, then definitely throw a layer of epoxy over your base coat so that you have a shiny layer underneath your wrap. And it's not going to show any of those blemishes or imperfections, little bubbles that you might have underneath it. So I have trimmed this to slightly under 8 inches. And I trimmed a little piece off of the top as well, just so I have a clean edge on the top and the bottom. And you're just going to want to trim the excess backing off of the side so we have a little piece that can stick to the cup. Now the way that I do this is I will line my wrap up with the top rim of the tumbler and just pull it down ever so slightly. So when I do sand after my first coat of epoxy, it will expose the rim and you're not going to damage your wrap. I know this is not the way that the majority of people do it. I have watched numerous other tutorials, and I always see them doing the full wrap and then trimming the excess off the top. I have had horrible experience with that. I always end up chipping a little bit too much, or I don't get a smooth rim. It goes too far to the top, and then when I sand, it just makes it all wonky. So this is how I do it. Do whatever works best for you. As you saw how much I did cut off of these, it does come large enough to have a little excess over the top and the bottom if you want to do it that way, and then just trim off the excess with your X-Acto knife or craft knife once you have it on your tumbler. So what I do is make sure that my edges at the top are perfectly lined up. Once they're perfectly lined up, then I will just push down that excess that I left hanging over the edge of the backing, and pull the backing off just a little bit and work my way around the cup. I am going to speed this up, but I'm going to show the entire thing so you guys can see that it does take a little bit of time. You want to get all of the air bubbles pushed out. They have tools, you can buy them on Amazon, little squeegees that will probably make this a little bit easier than just using my hands like I am now. But just take your time, make sure that you're getting out as many bubbles as possible from underneath, and pay close attention to the top and the bottom rim to make sure that you are staying in line. These are removable. However, since I only have a spray painted base, it is difficult to lift them up without lifting the paint as well, regardless if the cup is prepped or not. So if you're not comfortable with putting a full wrap on without, the layer of epoxy underneath where you can remove it a little bit better, definitely throw you one layer of epoxy on. That way you can easily pull this up if you have any issues or if it's, uneven. So to trim off this overlap, I'm just going to take my craft knife, make sure that it's a fresh blade or a really sharp one, and I'm going to cut directly in the middle. That way I can pull what is underneath out and then pull that remainder off of the top as well and get a perfect seam down the center. Now I did use a couple more of these wraps, as I said in the beginning, and some of them you don't even have to trim the excess off. The pattern just lines up so perfectly or is busy enough to where you cannot even tell that there's a seam, especially when you're putting glitter over top. Unless it reflects like a darker tone, you really don't have to cut the extra off, because once you apply the glitter and the epoxy on top, you're never even going to notice that it's there. Now make sure that when you are cutting this, you're applying enough pressure to go through both layers, and then just pull off the little piece that is overhanging on the top and find the little piece that is underneath by pulling up a corner. And then I usually just pull this out at an angle. It prevents it from pulling any of the paint up and keeps the vinyl in place, or the wrap in place, while I'm removing it. Then just press your seam back down and you are ready for epoxy. And a humongous thanks to Heather over at Brilliant Southern Designs for coming to my rescue with Firefly from PDB Glitters. This is like the golden glitter of glitter world, so I could not get my hands on it. And I'm gonna link her shop below. She makes custom care cards and cards to display like pop grips and pins, so check her out, y'all. All right, so as you have seen, I added Firefly into my epoxy and I just applied that all over the cup. I really don't think you can add too much unless it's just making your epoxy too thick. So just roll with it. Add a little, add a lot. The design is going to show through on these gracefully created wraps. I'm just going to brush over this with a torch. And once that dries, I'm going to move directly into the next step. Here I'm going to mix a color to match the base spray paint. I didn't have a perfect color on hand, so I just thought I would mix it myself. I'm using a white acrylic and then a tan acrylic just to get the color that I wanted. And I'm going to be using a piece of a paper towel just because the paper towel is textured and I like the texture that it gives whenever I dab the paint on. But you can use a foam brush or anything that's going to allow you to kind of sparsely apply this so you can build it up to the way that you like it. So I just threw some paint on here to start, and I'm just going to dab it on with my paper towel. Now you could do the power wash method, which would have been my preference. If you want to check out my Sunflower Mom tutorial, I do go through how to do a power wash spot. But the weather has been so unpredictable and horrible around here lately, so I just went along with this, especially since I mentioned that I would show you guys how I did an acrylic spot sometime in the future. And just to make sure that it is going to be large enough for my entire decal, I've just held the decal that I'm going to be using up against it and made sure that it was wide enough. You probably could mark this underneath the acrylic so you know what your boundaries are, and then just dab over it. I didn't think of that before I started doing my spot. But I did forget to mention that I applied this spot over my seam. It wasn't highly visible, but I still always put my decals, if they're large enough to cover it, about 80%, I put them over top of my seam so it looks completely seamless. If you want to eyeball it and I guess a nitpick, I always nitpick everything, so I just wanted to cover it up. And then I'm going to take about 20 milliliters of a little extra ink epoxy and apply over this after it dries. Now, I did make a mistake here. I don't know if it's because I was using cheaper acrylic paints or what, but for some reason my acrylic paints lately have been giving me crazy bubbles, like if I was to use a matte printable vinyl. So I should have went over this with a coat of the Rust-Oleum matte clear, but I didn't, and I had to come back and torch it a couple of times just to get those bubbles out of the acrylic paint. But once that dries, just trim your decal to expose the edge of it, and we are going to apply this using the hinge method. I'm just going to line that up with the acrylic spot to make sure that it is centered. And once I have it centered, I will press down the sticky side or the exposed side of my clear cast decal. Again, this is from Gracefully Created. And then remove the backing as I press the decal down. Now, you probably just saw that it stuck to the cup a little bit. I was extremely impatient with this, and it had only been like 4 hours after I applied my last layer. The good thing about a little extra ink epoxy is it's literally like a cross between a regular epoxy and a fast set. And my impatient self could not wait to apply the decal to this cup because I was just so in love with how it was turning out. So take note, wait until your epoxy is completely dry so your decal paper will not stick to your cup. And just apply this exactly the same way as we did the wrap. Make sure that you are getting all of the bubbles out from underneath it, and once you have that completely on, press it down really well and make sure your edges are pushed down all the way as well. Because if your edges are up, then that can cause like a little lip underneath your first layer of epoxy over this, and you definitely don't want that because you don't want the edges to be visible. So press that down, and then I went over this with 2 additional layers of a little extra ink epoxy, and here is the final result. I am seriously blown away by this. This wrap is literal perfection, and I could totally take credit for glittering each of these stripes if I wanted to, but I didn't, and all the credit goes to Gracefully Created with these gorgeous wraps. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. As always, there are links to everything used in this tutorial in the comments, as well as some discount codes for y'all. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe, and join our Facebook group. We have lots of fun in there, and I'd love to see everything that you create as well. And that is all for today. Thanks, you guys. Bye.